I never thought I'd be sitting here at nearly 60 years old, holding nothing but a rubber chicken, while my life's work slips through my fingers like sand. That $5 million chicken farm wasn't just a business, it was my legacy, built from nothing but calloused hands and stubborn determination. 3 generations of my family had worked that land before I handed the keys to my only son, Robert. "It's your birthright," I told him, my voice thick with pride. 2 months later, he sold every acre to a developer, dropped this toy on my kitchen table, and walked away with a smirk I'll never forget. "Something to remember me by, Dad," he said. "A chicken for the chicken man." I didn't raise my boy to be cruel, but looking back, maybe I never really knew him at all. There were signs I ignored, conversations we should have had. The truth about our family runs deeper than most folks could imagine, and it's time I finally told the whole story, from the day I started that farm to the moment it all came crashing down. I grew up in rural Georgia, where a man's worth was measured by what he could build with his hands. My father, Joseph Miller, started our chicken farm in 1965 with just 50 birds and a broken-down coop. By the time I was 10, we had 3,000 chickens and supplied eggs to half the county. Dad was a hard man, never cruel, but never gentle either. "This land is everything, Earl," he'd say. "Without it, we're just drifters passing through this world." My mother, Clara, died when I was 12. Cancer took her quick. After that, it was just Dad and me, plus my older sister Margaret, who moved back home to help raise me. We weren't the huggin' type of family. We showed love through work. Shared labor was our language. I remember when I was 14, I let some neighborhood kids convince me to borrow our truck to go fishing at Willow Creek. We crashed it into Thompson's fence on the way back. At dinner that night, Dad didn't yell. He just looked at me and said, "Tomorrow, you'll rebuild that fence. Then you'll work double shifts for 3 months to pay for the truck repairs." The whole church congregation heard about it. For weeks, folks would ask, "How's that fence coming along, Earl?" The humiliation burned worse than my sunburned neck. Then there was the high school graduation disaster. I'd been dating Sarah Johnson for 2 years. I was planning to propose after graduation, had my grandmother's ring and everything. But at the ceremony, when families gathered at the football field, Sarah showed up with James Wilkins, the banker's son. "We've been seeing each other for months," she whispered. "I couldn't figure out how to tell you." My father watched the whole thing unfold, his face unreadable. Later that night, he simply said, "Women come and go. The land stays." It was the closest thing to comfort he knew how to offer. I married Diane Peters when I was 22. She was beautiful, smart, too smart for our small town, really. We had Robert when I was 30. By then, I'd taken over the farm from my aging father, who died 3 years later. I expanded operations, modernized, took risks Dad would have considered foolish. But it worked. By my 40th birthday, Miller Family Farms was worth over $1 million. Robert was a quiet child, always watching, always thinking. Different from me. While I loved the physical work, the rhythm of farm life, he preferred books and computers. I tried to instill my father's values in him. "This will all be yours someday," I'd tell him during our dawn-to-dusk summer work days. What I never told him was the secret about the land, about how it really came into our family. A secret my father made me swear never to reveal. When Robert turned 18 and announced he wanted to study business at Emory University instead of agricultural science at the State College, I felt betrayed. We had our first real fight. "You think you're too good for honest work?" I shouted. He just looked at me with those calculating eyes, Diane's eyes, and said, "I'm going to make something of myself, Dad." I let him go,
paid for every penny of that expensive education, telling myself he'd come back when he was ready. He did come back, but not how I expected. The grand gesture came on his graduation day. I drove to Atlanta in my best suit, the farm's deed tucked inside an envelope. After the ceremony, I handed it to him. "It's yours now," I said. "Everything I've built. $5 million of prime Georgia farmland and a profitable business. Your inheritance, given early." Diane, who'd divorced me 5 years earlier, watched from a distance, her face unreadable. Robert hugged me for the first time in years. I thought we'd finally connected. I was wrong.
2 months after I signed over the farm, we planned a family barbecue, the first since Robert took ownership. He insisted on hosting, saying he wanted to show everyone his vision for the future. I arrived early to help set up, expecting to see the usual Miller farm, maybe with some small improvements Robert had mentioned. Instead, I found surveyors placing stakes across the fields, men in hard hats examining the chicken houses. "What's going on?" I asked Robert as he emerged from his farmhouse. "Progress, Dad." He gestured toward a roll of blueprints on the porch table. "Riverview Estates, 200 luxury homes, a golf course, and a shopping center." My heart stopped. "You're developing the farm? Our family's legacy?" "I'm maximizing an underperforming asset," he corrected me, using that business school terminology I'd grown to hate. "The chicken business is dying in Georgia. This land is worth 10 times more as residential property." I couldn't breathe. "You can't do this. This land is mine now," he interrupted. "You signed the papers yourself." The guests started around noon. My sister Margaret with her husband Frank, cousins from Savannah, old friends who'd worked the farm with me. Even Diane showed up with her new husband, a dentist from Atlanta. Robert had invited everyone who meant something to our family, and I realized this wasn't just a barbecue. It was an announcement. I tried to keep my composure as Robert played the gracious host, leading folks on tours of the property, pointing out where the model homes would stand, where the clubhouse would be built. My brother-in-law Frank cornered me by the coolers. "Did you know about this, Earl?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Found out an hour ago," I admitted, my knuckles white around my beer can. Frank shook his head. Joseph would roll over in his grave. The afternoon heat was oppressive, matching my rising anger. Robert had gathered everyone around the big oak tree, the one my grandfather had planted when he first came to this land. The developer, a slick man named Harrington, was there with presentation boards on easels. Words like property values and community benefits floated through the air. I watched my son shake hands with this stranger, both of them smiling over my family's destruction. Something inside me started to crack. "The first phase begins next month," Robert announced to the crowd. "The chicken houses come down first. Then we'll drain the pond for the golf course water features." Margaret gasped beside me. That pond was where our father had taught us to fish, where Robert had caught his first bass at age 7. "You can't just erase our history," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. Robert's smile tightened. "Dad, we agreed to save this discussion for later." "We agreed to nothing," I shot back. "You ambushed me with this, ambushed all of us." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Diane stepped forward, ever the peacemaker. "Robert, maybe this isn't the right time." "It's exactly the right time," he interrupted. "Everyone needs to understand that this farm isn't sustainable anymore. Dad's methods are outdated. The equipment is failing. The profit margins are razor thin." "That's not true," I argued. "We made $500,000 last year." "On $5 million of land? That's a 10% return. The development will yield 30% minimum." The conversation devolved into a business debate, ROI and capital investments, terms that meant nothing to me compared to the generations of sweat that had soaked into this soil. Then Robert dropped the bombshell. "Besides," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "this land was never really ours to begin with, was it, Dad?" The world seemed to stop. For 50 years, I'd kept my father's secret.
How could Robert know? I don't know what you're talking about, I stammered. I found Grandpa Joseph's old lockbox in the attic, Robert said. The original deed was there, along with letters from the Thompson family. Margaret stepped forward, confusion on her face. Thompson? You mean like our neighbors? Robert's eyes never left mine. Not neighbors, the rightful owners of this land. The family that Grandpa Joseph cheated out of their property during the Depression. The gathering fell silent. Even the cicadas seemed to pause their summer chorus. That's a damn lie, I growled, though I knew it wasn't. My father had won this land in a poker game from a desperate man who couldn't read the contract he signed. Dad had made me swear never to speak of it. Is it? Robert challenged. Because I've already spoken with Thomas Thompson III.
He's here today, actually. And from the crowd stepped an elderly black man I'd seen around town but never spoken to. The great-grandson of the man my father had wronged. The barbecue guests parted like the Red Sea as Thomas Thompson III walked toward me. He was tall, dignified, wearing a pressed shirt despite the Georgia heat. His eyes held no anger, just a steady resolve that made my shame burn hotter. "Mr. Miller," he nodded, "been waiting 60 years for this conversation." My throat went dry. The secret I'd buried so deep was now exposed for all to see. Friends and family stared at me, waiting for a denial that wouldn't come. "Your grandson contacted me last month," Thompson continued, "showed me the original papers, said he wanted to make things right." Robert stepped forward, placing himself between us. "The development deal includes a trust fund. 10% of all profits go to the Thompson family in perpetuity. It's the restitution they deserve." "Restitution?" I finally found my voice. "You're not making anything right. You're destroying everything to cleanse your conscience." "No, Dad, I'm correcting a historical wrong while moving us forward. It's good business and good ethics." Margaret grabbed my arm. "Earl, is it true? Did Daddy steal this land?" The weight of 50 years of lies crushed down on me. I looked at the faces surrounding us, people who'd respected the Miller name, who'd seen us as pillars of the community. "Joseph Miller wasn't a thief," I said, my voice shaking. "He was a survivor. It was 1938. The Depression had taken everything. William Thompson Sr. bet his deed in a poker game. Dad won fair and square. A poker game where Grandpa was the only one who understood the contract," Robert countered. "A desperate black farmer against a white man with connections to the county judge. How fair was that, really?" Thomas Thompson nodded slowly. "My grandfather couldn't read, Mr. Miller. Your father knew that when he had him sign those papers." The revelation hit the gathering like a thunderclap. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I saw judgment in eyes that had always looked at me with respect. "So this is your revenge?" I turned to Robert, my voice rising. "Selling off our family legacy to punish me for something my father did before I was born?" "It's not revenge," Robert replied coolly. "It's business. The land is worth more developed. And yes, the Thompsons deserve their share. 2 birds, 1 stone." Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed guilt, the betrayal by my son, the public humiliation, it all erupted at once. "You ungrateful little bastard," I shouted, lunging toward him. Frank and a cousin grabbed my arms, holding me back. "I gave you everything, everything. And this is how you repay me? By destroying my life's work? By dragging our name through the mud?" Robert didn't flinch. "Our name was already in the mud, Dad. I'm just the one willing to wash it clean." "By selling out? By turning farmland into another soulless subdivision?" "By moving forward," he insisted. "This isn't 1965 anymore. Small farms are dying. The land is worth more as housing, and the Thompsons will finally get their due." I broke free from the restraining hands and got right in my son's face.
Your grandfather would be ashamed. I'm ashamed. Grandpa was a thief, Robert said quietly, and you've been living off his stolen goods your entire life. At least I'm trying to make it right. The words hit me like physical blows. I staggered back, looking around at the stunned faces of our friends and family. Diane wouldn't meet my eyes. Margaret was crying. The Thompsons stood awkwardly to one side, unwilling participants in our family implosion. "You want the truth?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "Here's the truth. I didn't give you the farm because I thought you deserved it. I gave it to you because I was tired of watching you resent it, tired of your judgment, tired of never being good enough for my college-educated son. Take it, destroy it, build your precious development. But don't you dare pretend this is about justice." I turned to Thomas Thompson. "I'm sorry for what my father did to your family, truly. But this," I gestured to the development plans, "this isn't making anything right. It's erasing history, all history." Without another word, I walked away, straight to my truck. I could hear Margaret calling after me, but I didn't stop. As I pulled away from the farm, my farm no longer, I saw Robert in the rearview mirror, standing tall among the ruins of my life, watching me leave without a trace of regret in his eyes.
I drove aimlessly for hours, eventually finding myself at Willow Creek, where I'd crashed my father's truck all those years ago. The water still flowed the same way, indifferent to human drama. I sat on the bank until sunset, replaying the day's events like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Margaret mostly, but also calls from friends who'd witnessed my humiliation. I ignored them all. Around midnight, I checked into the Pinewood Motel on the edge of town, a place where traveling salesmen and couples having affairs sought anonymity. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was hiding in my own hometown. Margaret found me the next morning. She'd always been resourceful. "You look terrible," she said, sitting across from me in the motel's dingy breakfast nook. "Feel worse," I admitted. She pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "Is it true about how Dad got the land?" I nodded slowly. "He made me swear never to tell, said some secrets need to stay buried for the family's sake." "And Robert found out?" "Apparently." Margaret sighed. "He's not doing this to hurt you, Earl. He genuinely believes it's the right thing." "Selling off our heritage is the right thing?" I scoffed. "The heritage is complicated now, isn't it?" She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I spoke with Thomas Thompson for a long time yesterday, after you left. His family has been watching us work that land for 3 generations, knowing it was theirs. Imagine that!" The weight of that perspective settled on me like a stone. "What would you have had me do, Maggie? Give up everything Dad built? Everything I built?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but Robert found a third way." "Turning it into a golf course is not a third way." "The development includes a museum," she said, "a local agricultural history center on 5 preserved acres by the creek. Both families will be represented, the Millers and the Thompsons. The complex truth." That surprised me. Robert hadn't mentioned any museum. 3 days later, I returned to the farmhouse to collect my personal belongings. Robert wasn't there. In Atlanta, meeting with investors, according to the foreman who was now supervising the initial survey work. I walked through the house where I'd been born, filling boxes with photographs and mementos. In my old office, I found an envelope addressed to me in Robert's precise handwriting. Inside was a detailed breakdown of the development deal. The numbers were impressive, even to my untrained eye. Robert had negotiated a 20% ownership stake for me, in addition to the cash from the sale. There would be a trust for future Miller generations. And yes, the agricultural museum Margaret had mentioned, preserving 5 acres of the original farmland as a working educational exhibit.
At the bottom of the last page, Robert had written, "I couldn't keep living a lie, Dad, but I didn't want to destroy what you built either. This is the best compromise I could design. The Miller legacy continues, just differently. R." Attached was a cashier's check for $1 million, my first distribution. I sat at my desk, Robert's desk now, and stared at that check for a long time. Was this blood money, conscience money, or simply my fair share of a business decision I was too stubborn to make myself? The next day, I drove to the Thompson family home on the other side of the county. Thomas Thompson III welcomed me onto his porch without surprise, as if he'd been expecting me. "Your boy's got a good head on his shoulders," he said, offering me iced tea. "Better than our fathers had, maybe." "You're not angry?" I asked, "about the land?" Thompson shrugged. "Been angry plenty long enough. Doesn't change anything. My daddy and granddaddy died working other people's fields, knowing they should have had their own. That anger killed them both before their time." "I didn't know," I said lamely. "Not until I was grown. And then what? You had a choice too." His words stung because they were true. I'd known and chosen silence, chosen comfort. "The museum was my idea," Thompson said unexpectedly. "Your boy wanted to give us a straight cash settlement. I told him I wanted our stories told side by side, the whole truth." I nodded slowly. "That seems fair." "Nothing about this is fair, Miller, but it might be right." 2 weeks later, demolition began on the oldest chicken houses. I couldn't bear to watch. Instead, I used some of my distribution money to buy a small house in town. The rest I put into a foundation for agricultural scholarships at the community college. Robert came to see me before returning to Atlanta. He stood awkwardly in my new living room, a stranger wearing my son's face.
"I brought you something," he said, handing me a gift bag. Inside was a rubber chicken, bright yellow, ridiculous. "A chicken for the chicken man," he said, a hesitant smile forming. "Dad, I know you think I betrayed you." "I did," I interrupted. "But I've had time to think. You found a solution I never could. Too much pride, maybe, or guilt. The development breaks ground next month. The museum planning committee wants you involved." I squeezed the rubber chicken, its silly squawk breaking the tension. "Thompson mentioned that, said he wants both our perspectives. Will you do it?" I looked at my son, really looked at him for perhaps the first time in years. He wasn't the farmer I'd tried to mold him into. He was something else entirely, something necessary for these changing times. "On one condition," I said. "The museum keeps a working flock, just a small one. Some things shouldn't exist only in memory." Robert nodded. "Already in the plans. Heritage breeds, educational programs for local schools." That rubber chicken sits on my mantel now, a reminder of what was lost, but also what was found in the ruins. A complicated truth, a bridge between past and future, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of healing between father and son. Looking back now, I realize that legacy isn't what we build, it's what we repair. That rubber chicken reminds me daily that the truth, however painful, ultimately set us all free. The Riverview Estates broke ground last spring, and the Georgia Agricultural Heritage Museum opened its doors last month. Thomas Thompson and I cut the ribbon together, two old men finding unexpected friendship in the aftermath of generations of silence. Robert visits more often now, bringing my granddaughter to see the heritage chickens that scratch and peck just like their ancestors did on this land for generations. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become bridges if we're brave enough to cross them. The past doesn't have to dictate our future. Sometimes it just needs to be acknowledged so we can all move forward.
If you've ever had to confront a difficult family truth or found yourself caught between tradition and progress, share your story in the comments below. And if you appreciated this journey into the messy reality of family legacy, hit that subscribe button for more stories about the complicated ways we hurt and heal each other. Sometimes the most important inheritance isn't what we're given, it's what we choose to do with it.